Administration Committee. We will call the Finance and Administration Committee to order. And first of all, we have a roll call. So do we need to go through that? No? Okay, so we know who's here. We have a couple people online, and I will be trying to remember to look for you to wave your hands when you want to speak or just speak up, okay? So, because you're really small down there, I want you to know that. All right. So first item on the agenda is, after the roll call, is a declaration of interest. And have we had any declarations of written interest? No. All right. Are there any verbal ones? And just in case, no. All right. So then we go on to the adoption of the agenda. So the motion is that the resolved that the agenda for the November 28, 2023 Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting be adopted as presented. I need someone to move. Paul Kehoe moves. Mary Lou Suter seconds. Are there any comments on the agenda? No amendments. All right. All in favor? Motion is carried to adopt the agenda. All right, our next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the 2nd of October, 2023 from the Finance and Admin Committee. So resolved that the minutes of the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting held October 2, 2023 be received and approved as printed. I need someone to move. I see Kathy Curry moves. I see Andrew Kendrick seconds. Are there any comments on the minutes? Yes, Mary Lou.
Comment and question, and I don't want to take the committee's time with this, but at the end, could we have a fast update on the K&P Trail landowners dispute, please?
Okay, so that would be an amendment to the agenda. All right, so we have to go back to amend the agenda. Okay. You're saying never mind? Right. All right. Pardon me?
Motion to accept the agenda.
No, I know. I mean, I'm okay with doing that. Yeah. All right, so we'll just go back and hold on here. Resolved that the agenda as amended for the November 28, 2023 Finance Administration Advisory Committee be adopted. I need someone to move. So I'm going to say Mary Lou, you move. Richard seconds. All in favor? Everyone's voting. Right. And so we'll add that to the agenda. So we have a vote on the floor for adopting the minutes. So no more comments or questions. All in favor? Okay, looks like everyone's voted. So all in motion is carried. All right. So we have a report now on the IT asset management plan, and I guess Alex will be presenting. Is that correct? Okay, so over to you. So just before Alex starts, if the online attendees do have a question, we won't be able to see you. So please use the raise hand function of Zoom. Okay, got it.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen and people at home. My name is Alex Broadbent. I'm the ITC manager here at the Conservation Authority. I'm sure you all know that. I'm pleased to present an overview of the asset management plan that's found in your agenda package today. I'm really pleased. I know Sally and I are really pleased to present this asset management plan. It's a key document, something that we've been working on and something that we didn't have and we're hoping is going to bring us forward with meaning. So just a step back, we had a independent review of our IT assets this year to help guide us. And I'm going to overview some of the key components of that review and the asset management plan moving forward to rebuild our systems. The first slide here is an overview of our current network. And I'll just help explain this. I hope it will help frame the next discussion. MVC has described as a hybrid network where most of our equipment and processes are on site, on premise, but we do have a cloud environment in this blue cloud looking device where we employ proprietary software as a service and also cloud backup, which is employing other people's computers. So we considered that a cloud. In this diagram towards the center, you can see our server environment, which includes our domain controller that controls all the users and their relationships to the files and the computer processes that are invoked. Then we have a data and a file store and a license manager and a virtual environment that houses mostly the ArcGIS Enterprise environment. Coming to the middle, to the top where the yellow fire is, this I'm trying to explain for people at home. This is our firewall. This is a key component to help with cybersecurity and keeping our network safe. It feeds out to the internet and the internet into it, reducing malicious attacks. Next to the firewall, it attaches to the network switches, which go off to all the other devices, including security cameras, desktop computers and laptops, our telephone system, photocopiers, building automation processes, our Wi-Fi, and then finally smartphones and the like. Back to the middle for the switches, we connect over to NAS, network attached storages, where we house large volumes of data such as LiDAR, orthophotography imagery, and our photo library and such. So that in a nutshell is our current network. And I hope that does give an idea of the complexity of our system and frames what I might be speaking about next. So through the IT review, we had a look at all of our hardware, and that would include servers, what I call client and endpoints, that's laptops and desktops, and in a nutshell, the network printers. So when we think about servers, the asset management plan goes into detail. And at this point, we're looking to replace all of our current servers. That would be our SBS, which is the domain controller, the app server, which is our main file serve for our main repository of daily network files that we work on. And then the virtual machines, which is housing the ArcGIS environment. So those are on 3 servers. They're old and antiquated at this particular point in time. And the recommendation is to buy one giant computing server with all the network, all the computing, with all of the resources, computer resources, to virtualize an environment to hold all of these services that we have on one machine. It's called a virtual environment, and these resources would be shared between 4 servers. When we looked at the recommendations, we looked at the opportunity to go to a complete cloud environment versus the on-premise. And through the review, it was determined that the complete cloud environment was too costly to move in that. So the recommendation is to go to a single server, virtualize it, and carry on in that regard. Client endpoint computers, laptops. Our laptops and computers are in very good shape. They're mostly current. There was a large push due to the pandemic to invoke work at home. And the majority of our laptops are 2022 and 2020 and newer. We have 62 laptops in the organization, and they serve staff. We have 2 in here. We have them in our labs, and we have a number of spares in case one goes down. They're all in good shape. The recommendation is to replace laptops from an age point of view or when new staff come on, as per the current asset management plan of 4 to 5 computers a year, $5,000. There is a bit of a specification. We try to buy laptops for technical staff, buying an i7 with 16 GB of RAM or more. Non-technical staff would get an i5 with 8 GB of RAM. And that sort of is a generalization that supports technical staff and non-technical staff. The final piece of the hardware puzzle is network attached storage. These are they're smart devices that house large disk space. And we, like I said earlier, we put our large volume data, LiDAR, orthoimagery, and the like on it. We have 2 of them. One is a bit older, but it's working well. It's largely used for what I might describe as dead storage or old staff data, something that we might refer back to. The other unit is much newer, it's much more robust. It holds 30 terabytes of data, which is a lot. Maybe it's hard to imagine, but it's a large volume of data. It's still valid. The recommendation on this particular device is to maintain its service and maintenance agreement with the hardware provider and move forward. Software. The network review recognized that server operating systems all need to be updated and become current. Endpoints are okay. There's a recent move. Some staff are moving to Windows 11. Not all of the 62 computers can meet that mark, but 90% of them probably can. So as we move forward, we're moving forward to the Windows 11 environment. This is an overview of the majority of the software that we employ. We have a Microsoft Office suite, which is everybody uses, Adobe, and then the GIS, which is used throughout all environments, and a lot of staff use it for decision making, and then proprietary software for the engineering department, which is modeling suites for watershed modeling and floodplain development. So the recommendation through the asset management plan was continue to purchase Microsoft operating systems for our relationship with TechSoup, which is an agency that provides nonprofit pricing, and we get to enjoy that. It's a Canadian firm that provides a host of software, but in our case, we look for it for Microsoft and Adobe. The second recommendation is we need to review the total staff complement and its need for Adobe Pro products. We've been buying perpetual licenses at 5 at a time, but it's just not meeting the grade. So we have to plan a review on who needs it and how we might move forward on purchasing Adobe Pro products, whether it's more perpetual licenses or moving to a monthly SaaS, software as a service. Backup and disaster recovery. This is a very important aspect of network management. I'm going to be discussing cybersecurity, cloud backup, and I have a second cybersecurity. What a mistake. Sorry about that. So cybersecurity, of course, is very important these days. We handle our cybersecurity through a multi-pronged approach. Our first line of defense is our firewall. I mentioned earlier, we employ a FortiGate appliance. This is a manufacturer of high-end firewalls. It's recognized through the review that our current firewall is becoming end of service. I believe it is in 2024 due to replacement. We're very confident with the FortiGate appliance, and we plan to move on with that. It also has an antivirus component, but moreover, all client endpoints and servers are protected through a online SaaS service through malwarebytes.com. It's an antivirus company. So we have antivirus with that, and what we also call endpoint detection and response, where the system will recognize errant processes. If a computer gets infected, it will recognize it and shut it down. The recommendation on our antivirus is to further our game and get a managed endpoint and response in addition to the EDR that's currently listed. Managed endpoint is where you have a team of professionals that are monitoring it 24/7, and it just increases the ability to arrest malicious attack. The fourth point on that is also to purchase with the same vendor in this package a patch management system. And patch management would be software that races through our system and applies security and update patches to most of the software that we employ, Microsoft products, Adobe products, so on and so forth. Next point, cloud backup, online backup. This is quite deep, so I'm just going to touch the surface on it. Currently, right now, we have a cloud backup of about 5 terabytes of corporate data. This is actually coming to end of contract December the 7th. And the recommendation from the asset management plan is to move this to a Microsoft server and employ a OneDrive backup solution. There's benefits to this. It would allow us to employ nonprofit pricing and considerably reduce the financial cost of this. It also allows a synchronization of data that you can actively work on in a hybrid environment. Right, we've touched on cybersecurity. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Network infrastructure. In a nutshell, we've reinvested in internet. About 3 years ago, we got a Bell dedicated internet service, and it's robust, it's strong, and it's able to meet all of our internet needs now and moving forward on this plan. I spoke about the firewall that it needs replacing. The VPN is very important. It allows the hybrid environment to work in a safe manner. It's tied to that firewall. There's a note on the switches. The switches are still usable at this point, and they'll be reviewed in 2025 as we start to look at our phone environment for changes as that phone system reaches its asset life. Wi-Fi is recommended to be upgraded throughout the building as early as January 2024. Here's a review. It's in your package at the bottom of the asset management plan. It outlines some of the critical needs to attack first, the system component that it relates to, and some budget costs and pressures. So with that, I'll open it to questions.
All right. Are there any questions on the IT asset management plan? Yes, Paul.
Remember, there's no such thing as stupid questions, but there are a lot of inquisitive idiots. So with my IT knowledge, you're reducing from 3 servers to 1 monster server. Okay, so my question on that would be, is that a cost savings? And then the second question that comes from that is, if you have 1 monster server and the powers that be out there can wipe out that 1 server, would having 3 servers protect more of the data in case you do get into a situation where somebody crashes the system?
All right, thanks for a complex question. I guess the question, to answer it first, one of the servers was recognized replaced in 2023 and the second in 2025, I believe, and the money was allocated in the 10-year plan. So there is, buying this 1 server equalizes those 2 costs. So there's no extra cost. As far as it wiping out the system, each individual partition or virtual machine that we partition on this giant server is independent of the other. And they all have their safeguards through that cybersecurity that I demonstrated through antivirus and the firewall. You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions? Nothing on, yes, Kathy?
Thank you for this. The only question I have is, on a lot of boards that have sat on or currently sitting on, there is a plan or we've already done a tabletop exercise where an organization is, their data has been stolen or locked and there's a ransom. And, so we do as a board, and management goes through a pretend exercise, right? Where that has happened, and what do we do as a board so we understand what we would need to do. Do you see us doing one of these coming up at all?
Well, I can tell you from experience that we've done it twice because we had to. But as far as a emergency response disaster plan, I guess we do need to document it. So I mean, we're well aware of the steps that need to be done. I think that it needs to be written down.
Yes,
But
Sally.
in terms of the practice, sorry, for the board and new members?
I think let Sally answer that one, Alex, if she may.
We don't have anything for the board per se. The vulnerability that was identified during our audit was internal, meaning people within the organizations are our weakest link. And so we do have a very active program, Alex and I and others, in sharing phishing and other type of email that come in, and an active monitoring of web use, because the 2 times that our security was breached previously and we were subject to ransomware, that's how it occurred. Because people invited it in, unwittingly, of course. So our firewall was found to be quite robust, because after the last breach, we had a contractor come in and help us work through what improvements we needed to make. I'd be happy to take it offline with you, Kathy, and better understand what you went through with those other boards to see if that's appropriate for our board here.
Okay, thanks for that. We can certainly talk about that. I mean, the boards that I've done this for would be, the Children's Hospital Board, where when something like this happens, it is maybe a little bit of a bigger deal. And Hydro Ottawa, where, we're talking about everyone's power. So, I mean, it's not that this is insignificant, because if there is a ransom asked for and it's $3 million, what does an organization like the MVCA do with that request, right? You'd have to figure out what the board thinks of that, I guess. And you only have limited time. And anyway, we can talk about it, but that is something that I know every board is looking at, regardless big or small. Thanks.
Well, obviously, there would be 2 grants if we didn't do release, $3 million.
All right. If there aren't any other questions, I actually have a quick question, and that would be, of course, related to the budget. And if you could just very quickly summarize, the fact that, if there's any real impact after this IT assessment, sorry, IT asset management plan, do you see any major impact on the budget, capital or operating?
So not this year, but as the go forward, we need to really keep an eye on our SAS, this software as a service. Maybe, is there any further that you'd like? No. So we're okay because our existing 10-year capital plan had allowed for replacement of servers. It turns out to replace the 3-for-1 does not come actually at a greater cost. So the impact on our budget for 2024 is minimal.
All right, so I'm going to read the resolution. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve the IT Asset Management Plan as set out in Report 3367-23. So in other words, we're recommending that this be tabled to the board. I see Paul moves, Mary Lou seconds. Any more comments or questions online? No. So all in favor? Looks like the motion is carried. All right. Thank you, Alex, for your report.
Thank you.
All right. So now we move on to another interesting report, and this one is on our fleet management. So Scott Lauer will be presenting that.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So just a bit of an introduction to the fleet management plan that we've developed here. So the purpose of the plan is to ensure vehicles are reliable and safe for staff transport and for them to be able to complete their jobs. To hopefully meet the needs of each department. So each department is a little bit different in really how they use the vehicles to properly reflect the brand of the Conservation Authority. So I'm not necessarily saying we need to be driving around in Ferraris, but there is a professional standard that I think we would all agree we would want to keep our vehicles up to. And also hopefully to provide a framework for the management of the fleet moving forward. So a little background on our fleet itself. So the table in front of you here kind of provides a snapshot of the entire fleet. The current kind of condition of each vehicle, the year and the kilometers, and also the type of vehicle that we're using. And it also has a corresponding column that it'll relate it to which department is the chief user of each vehicle. So on the left-hand side, there is a lot of reference to the vehicle number, and it's kind of how we, internally, how we distinguish between each vehicle. But the synopsis of this chart is so we do have an aging fleet. The average age of the vehicles is around 8.5 years. So they're getting on in age. So during COVID, the decision was made not to procure any more vehicles, I think, until there was an understanding of how work was going to look in the future. And there was a reduction in travel during that time. So it's created a bit of an aging issue. So it's also, it leads to condition issues as well. So we have, half of our fleet that would be listed in quote unquote fair condition. And this is now leading to a rise in repair costs. So As was noted in the report, it was about $6,200 in 2020. And it jumped to almost 24,000 in 2022. And we're tracking to probably a bit lower for this year, but a similar repair number to 2022. And again, it's due to the aging condition in which we see a lot of our fleet that's currently in now. So a quick overview on the organizational needs versus the current fleet. So the fleet does largely meet the needs of the organization. So within each department, so the chief users would be the operations staff who were required to be in a multitude of different areas at any time of the year. So it could be the dead of winter. We could be going into remote dam and locations, could be our conservation areas. So it needs the ability to traverse those areas in that time of the year. So all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive is a must. Needs to be able to carry staff and equipment. And in our case, it's the ability to tow trailers. So we do tow heavier equipment. We have one vehicle that is CVOR licensed. So basically, it's the Commercial Vehicles Operators Registration. So it's required by the province to be able to tow the heavier equipment. So that is a vehicle that is we depend on fairly regularly to be able to get our equipment to the different locations. But in using the operations department as the example, the other departments are fairly similar. So our engineering department and our monitoring and service department are going into remote areas. It could be, within even with planning and regs, they could be getting into looking at properties again that are in remote areas and do require the ability to get in with four-wheel drive, and especially during the winter and adverse weather, to be able to navigate those areas safely. So it is a need within the organization, and the way the fleet is currently structured, it isn't that we're not that far off in terms of meeting the needs of each department. The one improvement that we could make is adapting the quote unquote floater vehicles. So we have 3 vehicles that are basically, they're not assigned to any one department and they're open for anybody to use. So if one department sees a need where they need an additional vehicle, they can use one of the floater vehicles, and they're also used for the admin staff to complete the various tasks. So currently right now, 2 of these vehicles are 2-wheel drive cars. So they're limited to what they can do in terms of the flexibility and meeting the needs of the other departments. So it is a focus to hopefully update those vehicles to greatly, I guess, to meet the needs of the other departments, to allow a little more flexibility. So as I said, the fleet is in need of updating. Based on the analysis we did on the last 3 years of kilometers traveled, and during the various times, we do see a pretty serious reduction in travel and use from right about now and this time of the year through until March. So, I mean, our primary area is operating March, April, through the summer and through the fall. So we could see the opportunity to reduce our fleet by at least 1 vehicle. In internal discussions, we have said that we'll hold off on doing so until we get a little more information through as we kind of return back to normal business practices. So rather than just reduce it right off the hop, we're probably looking at making that decision more towards this time next year and moving into the next fiscal after that, in terms of being able to reduce our vehicle or our fleet size. So we did look at various procurement options. So again, to kind of give you a synopsis of the chart here. So this is based off one example at one time. You could probably go and apply it to 1,000 different vehicles. But just for argument's sake, we picked a new Chevy Equinox, which would be a vehicle that we would possibly look at if we were going to start looking at updating those floater vehicles. As I talked about, it is a vehicle that would have 4-wheel or all-wheel drive, the ability to carry both personnel and equipment, and it can navigate those tougher areas. So to make some assumptions, so we're comparing apples to apples. So the purchase process acts as if the vehicle would be owned for the full 8-year kind of time frame. So it breaks it down to the sum. If you buy it for $47,000, give or take. I've applied the General Motors 8-year preventative maintenance schedule and estimated costs to that preventative maintenance schedule. In all honesty, that's probably a little high. There are times where following that schedule to a T is definitely beneficial, but then you're going to run into situations where going in and paying $200 for them to replace a cabin air filter probably isn't, the most effective use. But it definitely does help maintain the vehicle and to extend its life. Oh boy. So we've applied an 8-year preventative maintenance schedule to that. The lease is based off of 2 4-year leases. So the full lease there. When you get into leasing, one of the major costs is the restorative cost to get, if you're going to return the vehicle back to the dealership, there is a restorative cost that's associated with it. And this is an estimate based off of, they say, again, it comes down to really, it'll come down to a matter of opinion at that time, but they say close to showroom condition with regular wear and tear. So however that is laid out at that time. So I've applied approximately a $3,000 cost per every 4 years to be able to bring that vehicle back up to par. Same with the lease to own. So the major cost there in a lease to own is at the end of the 4-year lease, the dealership that you're working with will provide a cost for you to buy out that vehicle, and it's based off of a depreciated value at that time. So again, it's an estimate. Usually that depreciated value is anywhere between 50 and 60% of the original value of the vehicle. So it's assumed twice over a 4-year period. And then we also did look at the rental option, and the feedback based on the total monthly with fees and everything in, you're around $1,700 a month if you're looking at a rental fee. The one thing we did look at with the rental fee is it would allow us to, I guess, customize our schedule a little better. So if we did need a vehicle over a certain portion, a smaller portion of time, whether it be 4, 6, 8 months, it does allow a little of that flexibility, but it is definitely not the most cost-effective method of procurement. So in the end, you can see the total over 8 years is listed there. So the actual purchase method in terms of the financial state is probably still the best way for us to go when procuring vehicles. So in terms of recommendations and implementation, so we've already started on an improved preventive maintenance program. This does include yearly rust protection, which will go a long way in preserving the actual condition of a lot of our vehicles. We were hoping to make a purchase of 2 new vehicles in 2024. Again, we'd be looking to take out our older vehicles, the ones that are the most, I guess, in need of replacement at this point. And again, with keeping in mind of updating those floater vehicles to be more, flexible in terms of being able to service all departments rather than just the admin staff. And we're also looking at including the possibility of hybrid vehicles. It's not to say that it's a sole focus on hybrid vehicles, as a lot of the North American manufacturers seem to be moving away from hybrids in favor of EVs. But there are some benefits to hybrid vehicles depending on what the estimated travel would be for that particular vehicle. So we do need to focus on the upcoming replacement of our CVOR vehicle. Again, we're trying to get the most out of our vehicles at this point, but it should be a focus moving forward to be able to keep that in mind, that will be up for replacement in the near future. One of the big things that I've done since coming on is I've encouraged, especially any administrative tasks, that we do use our current hybrid vehicle. So Vehicle 34 is just a 4-door car that is able to, so at any point during the summer, you get essentially, I call it a free 80 kilometers, 85 kilometers, but it really costs you about $2.44 to charge that vehicle. So the math over the course of a year, if we use 2022 as an example, vehicle 34 operates around 8 cents per kilometer. That's a little bit high because it's based on the assumption of a full charge every time you use it, which in a lot of cases, that's not the case. But putting it up against vehicle 37, which is the other four-door car that we have in the fleet, vehicle 37 operates at around 14 cents a kilometer. So over the course of 2022, it's around a $1,300 savings in fuel, which, again, if you extrapolate it over numerous vehicles, the cost savings can add up. As I talked about before, we really want to update the floater vehicles to be able to conform to more of the needs of each department. We'd like to get into going back to replacing vehicles on an annual basis. It keeps the fleet in better shape. It'll lower the repair costs, and we'll also have better residual value coming out of the end of the term. Right now, a lot of our vehicles that we have wouldn't have a great residual value on it, but it's something we can correct kind of moving forward. More of the long-term or the midterm recommendations implementation. So we need to modernize the fleet and the infrastructure and at least look at going down the road to support electric vehicles. So now EVs, in my opinion, aren't quite at the level that we need them to be in terms of range and towing capacity. So anything cold weather, four-wheel drive, towing vehicles, anything like that is detrimental to the range of an electric vehicle. So in doing some of the research, we saw that some of our furthest trips door to door within our watershed in the past year are upwards of 450 kilometers. A lot of that would be pushing the limit of a lot of the range in some of the vehicles now. In my personal opinion, I think we need to see at least a 500 to 600 kilometer range to be able to operate electric vehicles in our watershed safely. My worry is how detrimental the cold is to the actual range on those vehicles, and also the infrastructure in place within our watershed to be able to charge those vehicles. So a lot of towns might have a gas station, but the question is how many of those towns would have a charging station if we were in a jam and needed to be able to charge those vehicles. So that's kind of the main worry in going to electric vehicles at this point, but I do think that will be a focus in the near future. So that said, initial estimates. So we've started kind of looking at building the infrastructure to be able to support a fleet of electric vehicles. So just if we installed a bank of level 4 chargers, or sorry, level 2 chargers in the compound to be able to service our fleet, we'd be looking at around $40,000 to $60,000 to be able to install those. And it's not the actual chargers themselves. The chargers themselves aren't that expensive. It's the infrastructure to be able to put it in place. So it's running the conduit and running the actual wires out there that is a majority of the costs. There are opportunities, though, to be able to look at grants to be able to mitigate some of that cost. And there's also a lot of the opportunities to be able to work with local municipalities, whether we're installing chargers here or at a different location to be able to service not only our fleet, but also to service the public as well. So if we're looking at even further down the road with staff having electric vehicles, or even if you take the example of the park out back, there's the possibility of looking to partner with the local municipality to install chargers if people are going to be parked here to make use of the park. There could be the opportunity to install chargers to help service those vehicles as well. So that's something that we are definitely looking into. So just final thoughts. The overall impact on the 10-year capital plan would be minimal based with this approach. The impact would be minimal from what's already been forecasted. So I believe I move back. So if we were to look at the capital plan for this year, sorry. if we were looking at approximately a $94,000 expense, we'd be looking, I think, at taking around $45,000 from reserves. So it'd be, there would be a little bit of impact from the reserve standpoint from there, but we also haven't purchased a vehicle in at least 4 years. So I think we've built up a fair amount on our reserve side. Again, this is a fluid plan that it'll need to be updated. So every purchase has an option. Every option would need to be looked at from a cost benefit analysis to see if it will fit the needs of our department, but also be a good purchase, I guess, cost wise. And we also could look at, especially with the age of our fleet, and we've come up against it already in a couple stages where we could look at being faced with a major repair without really knowing it. You could take the best care of your vehicles and you still could come up against a repair that you just don't see coming. And you could be forced with making a decision as to whether it's best to make that repair or to look at replacing that vehicle. So those are just the kind of things to keep in mind as we move forward. But this plan will help reduce the amount of unknowns moving forward and hopefully add a little better value to our fleet. So with that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
All right, so I'm looking for any questions. So I see Andrew and then Paul.
Thanks. Good report. I enjoyed reading it. On the electric infrastructure, do you have a layer in the GIS that shows where chargers are in the watershed and adjacent to the watershed?
I don't know. That'd be a good question. Alex doesn't think so.
I know we don't, that's something that we could start to build. There is such a thing. Yeah, they must, Google would have that. It's there.
All right, Paul.
Okay, so my questions are based on what you're saying right now. Usually when you go out for tendering, if you can have more vehicles on there, the better.
Mhm.
So you've talked about 2, but you're really saying that you've got 3 that are crappy. I think if I read through the thing right, I looked at the costs and stuff, and you got 3 that are up over like 200,000 plus.
Yeah.
So are you not better to go out for 3? And then the second part of that question is there any ability to talk to some of the municipalities that go out and will be buying vehicles next year so that you could just tag on to them? And I'm thinking here, and Kathy may stick up her hand, like the city of Ottawa or something who buys a number of vehicles every year, or Mississippi or Carleton Place that are larger municipalities that you could actually tag on to them and get cost savings that way.
Yeah.
And then I guess the final question is, you have these vehicles out there, and I know we just bought a 20-year-old fire truck from the fire department, half ton. So some of the municipalities might be interested in your cast offs.
Yeah, no, all good points. We do take advantage right now. So we work through, it's the same company that we purchase all our fuel through. So they do provide us with what they call fleet pricing when you're going out to dealerships. So we kind of receive a bit of a break, but yeah, in terms of volume, that is a good idea to maybe going out to our partnering municipalities to see if we can piggyback there. In terms of, like you say, in terms of replacing vehicles all at once, eventually then you're also going to get into a similar problem that we are now, where they will age out fairly rapidly and quite possibly all at the same time. And it also, again, I wasn't sure if I could come in and ask for, $200,000 to be able to upgrade vehicles for the next year. So I'm trying to take a little bit of the pressure off of everything. Hopefully lay out a plan that would help us update it in the near future, but also continue on a plan that wouldn't disrupt the 10-year capital plan that we've kind of laid out to this point, was the basis of thinking behind that.
Microphone, please.
I guess my point is that you're better to come in and ask for 200,000 to replace them to come in and say, oh yeah, we had to put $15,000 into a vehicle that's only worth 12 to keep it running on the road.
Mhm.
And that Dodge, whatever year it is, seems to be one of those ones that is just becoming a money pit.
I don't disagree.
All right, so that's been noted. Mary Lou.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. built into this plan, is there some kind of annual transfer to reserves in anticipation of this transfer of infrastructure to electric vehicles? Are we saving a little bit each year in order to offset that cost, or counting on grants?
The current 10-year capital plan didn't have us building the reserves over the next 5 years. Because overall, we were so far behind in the different reserves and what's going on with the water control structures, we were putting all kind of excess reserves to that in the short term. Starting after about 6 years, we starting to put more back into the vehicle reserves, but there's currently about $220,000 in the vehicle reserve. And we don't, other than this 2024, we don't have planned to take any more out of it.
Yes, I think Sally wanted to
Okay.
add something. That's all right?
So every year, we only need the reserves if we use the reserves if we need to. Some of the capital levy and our operating budgets, just it's pay-go, right? It's flow through. And so just because we're making a purchase doesn't mean we're necessarily drawing from the reserve. We may do it on a pay-as-you-go basis directly out of that year's revenues.
Okay, that does sort of lead to the second question, which was the perceived need within the next 2 years for approximately $220,000 for vehicles, 2 smaller vehicles plus the most important one that you've cited seems to be the big truck that can pull. So on one side, that means we've just about finished our reserves and could make it 3 or 4 years down the road difficult to buy much of anything. Or we've got some sort of plan to minimize the costs and transfer some savings.
The current plan, we don't anticipate, other than this coming year where the change was to add 2 vehicles instead of 1, where we're looking at budgeting taking $45,000 out of the vehicle reserve. After that, we're not looking at using the reserve to fund it. The capital levy and our other things currently are expected to be able to purchase the vehicles, as Sally indicated, as pay as you go. It would, the reserve would only be if there was something unexpected, again, such as this coming year, we're looking at 2 vehicles instead of 1.
All right, thank you.
All right, Kathy?
Yeah, thanks. So I would absolutely agree that there could be some help, good advice, information sharing, cost sharing, something. I don't know what cost sharing, but help certainly with a larger municipality like the City of Ottawa. I can tell you from sitting on the working group with the mayor and Councillor Carr, we looked at obviously how to save money in this year's budget. And from that, we had presentations to us from all kinds of organizations, including Hydro Ottawa. And they had a lot to say about fleet optimization and electric charging, and had lots of good advice for the city. So I would say a conversation with Cyril Rogers, the City of Ottawa's CFO, would be a good idea. And the other would be Bryce Conrad or another guy I can give you the name of, Andaz from Envari, which is a subsidiary of Hydro Ottawa, just to look at what they are seeing is the best thing to do for charging and for electric vehicles and for fleet optimization, because it's been a topic at a lot of different committees and definitely at that working group. So I would say that would be my one comment. The other is that as an owner of an electric vehicle, and I've had it since 2019, so it's not the exact same technology, but it's a real thing to think about if you're going to go long distances and be stuck out in the country where there may not be a charging station. You know, yes, you may have a good charging station at your location there in Carleton Place, but When you're stuck out and it's freezing cold and your battery's draining just by sitting there, it's a concern. But all of those questions have been considered by the city of Ottawa for sure and are currently being considered. So worth a conversation with those staff, I think.
All right, Mary, and then Roy.
Okay. Just again, in connection with that, one of the things that struck me when we transfer or at least build infrastructure for electric vehicles, has any thought been given to installing chargers in visitor areas such as the Milliken Tail and Morris Island perhaps, or some of our conservation areas where we could allow people to use them as well, or get access if we're in that area for our trucks?
Yeah, we've taken the initial look at going down that road, as I kind of alluded to in speaking about the chargers out back here for Roy Brown Park. It'd be a similar kind of approach when looking at Morris Island or looking at the mill. Those are actually, if you're talking the level 3, like the public facing rapid chargers, funny enough, that's actually where most of the bigger grants to cover the expenses come from. The grants that are available for the in-house like fleet chargers aren't nearly at that level. But it is something we're starting to look at.
All right, Roy, and then Richard.
Just one question and then a comment. You're talking about 2 new vehicles next year. Now, I haven't purchased a new vehicle in a few years. What's the waiting time for a new vehicle?
Again, so it'll come down to the option you're looking for and what you're looking at. So I just, funny enough, I've experienced exactly what I've drawn up in my own personal vehicle. I took care of my truck. I never had an issue with it. And in the summer, I blew the transmission like that. So the decision was invest the money into it. And then what else is going wrong in this vehicle as it's aging out? And I made the decision to invest in a new vehicle. And within 2 weeks, I flipped it all in. So I had the new vehicle that I wanted, and my truck was gone, traded in, and it just comes down to, that's what I mean, where the plan is hopefully to provide the best framework possible, because every single option is all different. Like the option that I looked at for leasing was that particular option at that particular date. It had no down payment. The next day you look, it could have a $2,500 down payment. So it's really a cost benefit. And again, it'd be based on, again, whatever we're looking for. So if what's on the lot fits our needs, great. If not, you're probably looking at a longer timeline.
And then as far as electrical vehicles go, I can appreciate, traveling from here all the way up to Plevna in North Frontenac with an electric vehicle, and it may have to wait until, let's say, North Frontenac gets, level 3 chargers up there, which we're discussing right now. And that will probably happen in the next year or two. So at that time, I think then you can look more at electric vehicles when you have a charging facility in the far reaches.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what we're looking at is, once we do get the infrastructure in place, if coming from me as a manager of the staff that are going up there, it'll make me feel a little comfortable that the staff are able to operate safely and they're going to get back safely. Because right now, if an electric vehicle dies and runs out of power, you have a 4,000-pound paperweight. Like, it's not like, oh, I'll just go, I ran out of gas. Okay, we'll go get you more gas. Or the battery died. Okay, we'll jump the battery. We can get you home. It's a little tougher when it comes to that. So that's my main concern when looking at going to a fully electric fleet.
Yeah, I'm actually, we're talking a lot about electric here, but basically the plan says we're not doing that for a while and they're going to come back, right? So really, we're spending a lot of time talking about it. And I know it's a really interesting topic, but we really are, I think, approving a plan that indicates that they are, that the Conservation Authority needs to begin to replace these vehicles. And at the current point, they're going to be doing it probably with gas powered. And that's the reality. But this plan also leaves, the options open. They will come back to the committee. They will come back to the board as things change over time, and we'll have a chance to debate any changes. So I believe that there have been some very good comments today, and they've been taken into account by Scott and the general manager. And some of these may be showing up at the board, maybe discussion, I don't know, maybe at the board, because they may be similar questions that come up, or at least that you are considering them. So what I would suggest is that I'm going to read the resolution and resolve that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve the fleet management plan as set out in report 3368/23. So I need someone to move. I have Roy Hudel moves. I need someone to second. I'm going to go with Andrew Kendrick seconds. And oh yeah, sorry, Richard, is that kind of one more comment?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a hard time that we're not setting an example with electric vehicles. That we're the Conservation Authority, and there should be an opportunity to do it somehow. And the other piece I wanted to point out is, I don't think the plan has to be that we pick one model and do it. For example, the renting of the vehicles, that $120,000, that was for renting it for the whole year. Was it not?
That was assumed over an 8-month period. So that would
Oh,
be,
sorry.
yeah,
Sorry. I
that
thought
would
it
be our main. So if we got rid of, let's say we reduced our fleet in half.
So you'd already figured
Yeah,
that out.
so, and that would be to be able to cover us through our main operational period of 8 months.
Yeah. But even renting a rental, electric vehicle. And the other point I'd like to make out is these charging stations, there are grants for them. And I think we should be looking at putting them in different conservation authorities where we have them. And we can be the leaders, the ones that, push the boundaries with those charging stations. You charge for them. It's not like the people that use them will have, it's our decision, but I would say we get cost recovery on that. So it's the capital cost you're talking about. And there are grants, as was pointed out, to do that right now. So I'd like if we'd look into that and how we could, push that line farther out so that it's just beyond the fringe. And we're doing this at the township. We're putting in 2 charging stations with 4 outlets. And I think it's the type of thing we should be doing in some of our areas so that we can push that out there.
Sally, you'd like to respond?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I agree with you. We would like to be leaders in this. And so part of the asset management plan definitely looks at how we can roll that out. And, on a phased implementation, looking here at our site, because not only do people literally park here to go to this park, and it's also in an urban area where lots of people might make use of it right next to Highway number 7 as well. So a public charging station here particularly would make sense as a first phase. The other thing that we're aware of is that the grants available to municipalities are more robust than the ones available to the CA. And so partnering for ones at our different locations, with the municipality, perhaps helping us in those applications to ensure that we're optimizing those grants. But I can say that moving into next year, we can absolutely come back to the board with another report that would be a supplement to this that starts to explore how we can implement electric charging stations and vehicles more proactively.
I guess my only comment was that on Highway 7, there's going to be lots of charging stations, that we don't have to be a leader here because it's going to happen here. Other places, even looking at our, I don't want to categorize people, but even looking at our audience, what are they going to be driving? People that are going to our conservation authorities, there's a good chance they could be leaders and wanting to drive electric vehicles. And I think doing them places where nobody else is doing it is more important than on Highway 7, where there's going to be lots of opportunities to charge vehicles along Highway 7. Anyway, just my point, but I think the sooner we do that, the better.
All right, I think Andrew, did you have your?
Yes, sorry, and I think it's been a very interesting discussion. I also agree with the desire for the Conservation Authority to show leadership. I think the fact that there is the potential expressed here to go with hybrid vehicles for the immediate acquisition, and then moving to fully electric as the infrastructure becomes available. That's an approach that I support, because I think it is displaying pragmatic leadership in this regard. And the only other thing that I'd add is that I hope that when the decision is being made, it's being made on a through life cost basis, because it's been emphasized today that the fuel cost is lower, the maintenance cost is lower. So I would hope that there is the ability here to transfer operational funds into the reserve funds, or to minimize the hit from the higher first cost.
All right, so with that, and with a commitment in the minutes to be taking a look at the taking leadership on the electric vehicle front, and another report to the board in the future, I would now look for a vote on the current vehicle asset management plans. We've already had mover and seconder, so all in favor.
Carried.
And I think, yes, the motion is carried. Thank you. All right. I knew cars would be an exciting topic. There's always one topic, and I knew it was going to be cars. Okay, so the next topic is 2024 fee schedule update. Not as exciting as cars. So Stacy, are you doing the, all right, thank you. Over to you.
I don't have a PowerPoint for this one, so I'll just sit here. We've updated the fee schedule, assuming that the province is going to lift the freeze at December 31st, as indicated in their original plan, and that they're not going to extend it. The basis for all of the permit planning and modeling fees is a 3% increase in line with South Nation and RBCA. We work those together to keep what's in the city of Ottawa in particular that we all service the same. So that's reflected throughout. There was some updating of wording, which is highlighted in yellow in the report to make things clearer. And on the conservation areas, Schedule D, we did a bit more of a market analysis and comparative over the last 6 months. These are our Category 3 programs. And again, we're trying to work towards more cost recovery and potentially a small surplus. That's certainly not where it's at yet. But we compared in particular to other historic sites such as Penny's Point and things like that, to be realistic comparative, not to other local wedding venues, which are crazy expensive. So the keys there were actually more, not changing the fees significantly, but on the rentals and weddings, putting in place that it's a 4-hour minimum instead of it's a day and it's yours. So there was some increase, but more putting some structure around how we were managing that. Did anyone have any questions?
Andrew.
Stacy, thanks. So by going ahead with a 3% for this year, the conservation authorities are essentially accepting that there's a 1-year hiatus in fee increases. So presumably the hope is that this will all pan out when a full fee review for cost recovery is undertaken, as we discussed at one of our recent meetings. But was there any discussion of trying to go with a higher fee, or was that just regarded as more than the market would bear?
So MVC actually adjusted its fees in advance of the freeze coming in last year. So we got our fee increases in under the wire. So we were not impacted.
All right, are there any other comments or questions on the fee schedule? Seeing none. Oh, yeah, okay, seeing none, I'm going to read the resolution. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve the 2024 fee schedule as set out in report 3369/23. I need someone to move. Andrew so moves. Mary Lou seconds. Always the same hands. Any more comments or questions? That's right. All in favor? All in favor? Let me see your hands. All right, looks like the motion is carried. And now we are on to the reserve policy update. And I think Stacy, you're doing that as well. All right, thank you.
Hello. So when the reserve policy was approved and implemented in July 2022, it was noted that we would need to come back and update based on when we're actually doing the full implementation of category 2 and 3, which we're at that point. And going through, I was going to do this is our current state of all the operating reserves, the projected 2023 end, where we have the general operating reserve, which is currently it's almost double what the target balance is set in the reserve policy. And as we've noted in the 10-year capital plan, our capital reserves are low from where they should be, but we're working on building them up fairly aggressively over the next few years. The proposal, I was trying to keep it simple, but something that would work towards creating operating reserves for category 2 and 3 to offset fluctuations in funding for those programs, to be able to continue them and minimize levy impact. The process that we went through in creating the category 2 and 3 MOUs had percentages. I used those same percentages as my basis for my proposed allocations for the reserves. So my recommendation is that taking 6% of the balance of the current operating reserve, which is approximately 89,000, and allocating that to hopefully the newly created category 2 operating reserve, and 8% of the current general operating reserve which is 119,000, and allocating that to a new Category 3 operating reserve. The total of those is the 14%, as in the MOUs. And the 2%, which was what we've set up as the new Category 3 capital levy. I've suggested taking what's in our current capital, 2% of that, which is approximately 39,000, and creating a Category 3 capital reserve. We currently have a reserve fund that's got $6,750 in it that's called the Museum Building and Art Reserve. My proposal is transferring that balance into the Category 3 operating reserve and closing the Museum Building and Art Reserve. That's a little small to see. This is my chart outlining that. You do have it in the report. As it's noted here, the target operating reserve balance is 747,000. I'm looking at taking 208,000 out of it currently, which would make the proposed 2023 year-end balance about 1.2 million. Setting up the two new operating reserves, how I determined or proposed their target balances was 1 year of the salary allocation, estimated budget, so that we're covering the costs of running the program for a year if we had funding fluctuations. And we're looking at not fully covering them to start. I'd say in the Category 2, had a target of 144,000, and we're looking at starting it off with 89,000. And the Category 3 operating reserve would have a target of around 280, and we're looking at starting it off with 125. Then the Category 3 capital reserve, the proposal was having the same target process as the rest of our capital reserves, except for the water control structure, which is the 5-year approved capital plan amount. So that has a target of I think it's about 114,000, and we'd be starting it off with about 39. Part of the intent with the operating reserves would be if there is in a given year a surplus under that program, same as currently with the operating reserve, it would build their operating reserve. That was overall the process. So I don't know if there was any questions.
All right, any questions on updates to the reserve policy? Yes, Mary Lou.
Yes, you have just said that in terms of feeding these new reserves to bring them up to target, you propose to use any surpluses within an operating budget. But is there any other source of funding? Would it be a slice of the future municipal capital levies that would go in to feed these?
We would be looking for grants, ongoing donations. We do get for capital, we get designated both donations and grants to cover those. And comparably on the operating side, there's other sources of revenue such as grants and charging fees.
And Sally, I think you wanted to add something.
So the agreements that the municipalities have signed say that up to 2% of the annual capital levy can go towards this Category 3, either the capital works in that current year or to build that reserve. So we look at both the capital levy and at grants and contributions for building that reserve.
All right, any more comments or questions? No hands online. I'm going to read the resolution. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve amendment of the reserve policy to provide for category 2 and 3 reserves as outlined in report 3370/23 and approve transfer of reserve balances as set out in report 3370/23. I need someone to move. Paul moves. And Mary Lou seconds. No more comments or questions from anybody? All right, I need, what am I saying? Oh, yeah, all in favor. Thank you. All in favor? All right, the motion is carried. So now we're on to the highlight of today, other than the vehicles. And that would be our 2024 draft budget. And we have another report that will be presented by Sally.
So good morning, everyone. I'm going to start by just reminding everybody the process that we follow, because there has been one change that the board approved earlier this year. So typically September, October, we take board direction as it pertains specifically to the increase to the levy. So the budget might vary up and down as things go, but it's really important for us to take board direction on how much the levy can change year over year. So that was done back in September, and right now we're tabling this to come to the board at the December 11th meeting. What happens after that is that it gets circulated to all of your member municipalities so that you as council members have the opportunity to review it and comment. And in parallel to that, I'm typically meeting and having discussions with the CAOs or financial managers in your organizations to see if they have any issues or concerns. In fact, some of those discussions start back in the summer when some of you are drafting your budgets. And then it will go back to the board with any recommended changes in February. If I see the need based upon comments received, I would contact the chair of the finance admin and ask for us to have a meeting. Historically, we used to absolutely have a meeting there because we would look at the financial statements. But you might recall earlier this fall, we requested permission to postpone the AGM till March, April, which is when we will now deal with the financial statements. So that makes the January, early February meeting of the FNA more optional at this point, because we're not trying to deal with financial statements in advance of an earlier AGM. So I just wanted to recap that with you. So in the budget, you would have seen that the budget does increase. It is almost identical, interestingly enough, on the operating side. There is an increase in capital, and we do have a major capital project this year coming. We had hoped to do the water and sewer connection this year, but it's looking like it's going to happen next year instead. So you can see the increase overall. So it's mainly capital that's driving a lot of the increase. So these pie charts just help you to understand where the money's going. So the bulk of it is going towards category 1 programming, and then also to category 2 and 3. You will per what Stacy just mentioned about the 6% and 8%, the actual numbers, I think are coming in close, but lower than that on the levy side in particular. But you can still see that most of the budget is being picked up by the municipal levy. We are doing, our effort to try to, per the fee schedule you just approved, being elevated to try to increase this going forward. Always pursuing grants and contributions. But we will need as well to draw down on our reserve funds. So these next few spreadsheets that I'm going to show you aren't actually in the budget document. We're going to add them for the version going to the board because they provide a nice synopsis of where the money's being spent. So under water and not just where it's being spent, but the sources of revenues at a glance. So a couple of things to note about this budget, particularly when you're looking at year-over-year differences, is that this was our final kick of the can in terms of redistributing costs per the new category 1, 2, 3. We've been trying to evolve in that direction ever since the legislation changed and then the regulations came out. But this is now per the regulations and practice across conservation authorities where we believe costs lie. So you can see that in all categories, there's a drop year over year from what was approved last year to what we're proposing for this year. And that's because we've had to extract costs out of those program areas and put them into these new category 2 and 3. Wherever possible, we've Stacy has tried to do a like for like kind of analysis so that you can actually see the movement of the money between the categories. It was very difficult. I'll just show you on the next slide here. Doing the breakdown for the monitoring proved more challenging, and so we just have identified here what's the proposed cost for this year. But generally speaking, that's why you're seeing a drop year over year. Also, the reason why the drop year over year is some programs are coming to an end. So for instance, we had a 3-year agreement with Conservation Ontario. They're administering a program on behalf of the federal government. And that program concludes federal fiscal year end March 31st of 2024. So those sources of grants are disappearing, and they actually really did help over the past 3 years. And so with them going down, certain program costs have also gone down. So you can see that under the category 2 and 3, and of course, I have detailed sheets that we can talk about in the budget itself. Category 2 is just under 300,000 and category 4 just over 400,000. So you can see that category 3, it does show an increase. That's in part the introduction of that new education program. You'll recall the board approved roughly $20,000 to re-implement an education program. And then as well, there are some additional costs that are being incurred at the across the board because of cost of living increases on payroll. At a high level, the capital program is the main thing is a continuation of our WECI project. So the biggest one here is the EA we're doing and moving into detailed design on the Kashwakamak Lake Dam. When we get into the budget document itself, I'll identify some more things. But there's continual work that we need to do at our conservation areas to maintain them from a safety perspective. corporate projects, this is where that 891 is where you're now seeing that water and sewer connection. The current cost estimates based upon ongoing discussions with Carlton Place is something north of $700,000. The technical studies, you'll see that we've capitalized certain technical studies, and this was a tactical decision, I'll say, as an organization, to capitalize some of the major pieces of products that we produce, like our mapping, like our models, because they require significant investment and they have a life cycle to them. And they are a product that we can actually share with others, and potentially at a cost. We'll have to look at that, but they are definitely things that in our reading and interpretation and previous discussions with our auditors, they say that we can capitalize. And then, of course, our debt repayment. So this is comprises this building as well as the work we recently completed on Shabamika Lake Dam. So yes, Andrew?
Thanks, Sally.
Sorry.
Can you just explain what the other revenue is, that 715,000 in particular? Is this taking out more debt?
Yes. So you may recall that in discussions around, so what our policy says is if a capital project exceeds $500,000, that we would contemplate debt financing it. And when we discussed this, I don't know, 3 or 4 meetings ago, we did discuss that the total value of the water and sewer connection was going to exceed 500,000, and therefore we would consider debt financing it. So that's reflected in this budget.
Yes, Mary Lou?
In connection with this building, how much longer will it take to pay off the mortgage?
Twenty 20 years, less than 20 years, you said. You said 2040? Yeah, 2040. So 17 years.
Okay, and when all this was done in 2012, 2013, was some money set aside at all for future connection? Or was the mortgage itself on the building at all that the Conservation Authority could afford at the time? So we're faced with that 715 now because we couldn't afford it before.
I can't speak to the reason why it wasn't put on the mortgage or et cetera at the time. I can say that some monies were set aside over the intervening years into the capital reserve to allow for the water and sewer connection, but they have proved insufficient because they need to pay not just for the water and sewer connection, but the decommissioning of existing infrastructure, as well as the payment to the town for bringing municipal services from Lake Road through to the property line here.
As when I read it, I thought of that. And I also thought, is there where any money potentially for what might be a lawsuit between us and the town over the amount that we're being levied to bring that to the property line? That is,
Yeah, you know, Mary Lou, we did discuss this at the last meeting, and I'm a little worried about where the conversation is going if it's not in camera.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to discuss this further, we can go in camera, but we have discussed this at length, this whole issue. And I think where in the finance and admin and at the board. So what I would suggest is perhaps, well, no, what I recall is that the general manager will be bringing back to the finance and admin committee and the board the status of the negotiations with with Carleton Place. But that's where we left it. We basically have given the general manager the leeway to go and make it and negotiate within a certain boundary, as I recall, and that she will have to come back to this committee and the board to discuss what the negotiated amount is or where it might go from there.
Oh, well, with your permission, could I withdraw the question?
Yes, thank you.
So the answer is we haven't come to an agreement yet. We can say that.
Yes, we haven't come to an agreement yet.
Okay,
Yes.
so that, just to put it, I was thinking that 700,000 would be about 20% of what this building cost.
In today's dollars, yeah, I mean.
No, not in today's dollars. In 2012 dollars.
Sorry, I misunderstood, not understanding. Like it was in 2012 dollars. You're comparing it to the value of the building in 2012?
Yeah, what it costs to build this building.
Right,
700,000 is about 20% of it.
right. Okay, fine. So at this point, do you want to continue in your presentation?
That was the last slide of the highlights. Now, I was going to propose, I was going to ask of the committee how you wish to proceed in terms of, because the budget document is quite lengthy. And I was going to propose that I could walk quickly through the summary sheets with you as opposed to the detailed sheets. If that, and I'm looking for direction from you rather than going into the detailed sheets that are at the back of the budget document.
I would just make the comment that having reviewed these for 10 years now, what an improvement this format is in understanding the budget. So I'd like to thank Stacy for making this so much more clear. I have spent hours every year trying to understand the budget. I was making this comment when we were having a pre-meeting with Sally a week ago with Roy and myself, and just so looking forward to this. And I think I took a third of the time to actually go through it. So thank you very much for this overhaul and separating it into the various categories in the capital. So I guess I'm looking for feedback. I mean, how much detail would you like to go into? Just speak up. Like I'm saying, no, but does anyone want to have Sally go through? I'm not seeing any hands. I'm not seeing Kathy's hand or Allison. I can't see, but yes, Mary Lou.
I'd just like to echo that because this is my first one. But I found the format, I found the explanations, I found the numbers very, very easy to understand. The only thing I really didn't have was any kind of history of previous ones, but it don't need that. And having gone through this budget summaries sheets that are on the board, I'm satisfied that this could go to the board.
All right, so what I'm going to then go to, since I don't think anyone's looking for a detailed walkthrough, is I'm going to now open it for questions and comments. So I'm looking for, does anyone have any questions or comments on the draft budget? Andrew.
Thanks. So one of my questions has been asked and answered already. I think I share the concern that's been raised about how expensive this water and sewage connection is. And I just wonder if the alternative of continuing with the existing infrastructure is realistic, or if that's something that we just have to move away from.
Yes, Sally? Okay, we will have to go in camera to answer that question.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll move to my second question, and then we can perhaps very quickly do an in-camera afterwards. The other one is just the status of the reserves, because what I'm not seeing, and maybe I'm just missing it in the accounts clear as they are, is that we seem to be drawing down on the reserves without making any significant contribution to the reserves. So is this a sustainable position over the coming years?
If you, I don't know if you recall the 10-year capital plan that we put in front of the board in the spring, we have a significant increase of that levy over the next several years to try and bring those back up. We're also looking at in next year, the amount of overage in the operating reserve. We were looking at transferring a significant chunk, 500 to 600,000 to the capital reserves. Part of that comes from the way the financial statements work in preparing the profit and loss. The capital levy and the capital budget is all based on a cash basis, what you need cash that year. When we're preparing the actual P&L and the audit statements, the amount that is considered an expense for that purpose from the current year is actually only the amortization and the interest on the debt payments for that year. And the previous approach, and I suppose still current that I'm hoping to change, was then that creates an operating surplus in that year. And to date, that has always just gone into the operating reserve. I'm hoping to actually restructure the audit statements this year so that there will be the operating piece and the operating levy, and there will be the capital piece and the capital levy. In the capital portion, there would be a surplus because under the capital expense would only be the amortization and the interest payment, but the amount of the levy coming in that year would be the full amount of the capital levy. So separating the actual operating levy and capital levy and creating potentially surplus, more surpluses going to that capital levy going forward, instead of whatever overall surplus has been going to the operating.
I was just going to also say, I believe that you are working on an update as usual to the 10-year capital plan that will be presented next year, right? So it's just another
Yes.
update,
Yeah,
right?
the intent is looking at
Yes.
updating that probably every year
Right. That's
as we
what I,
go, because the
yes.
situation changes.
yeah. So we'll get a chance to get a view forward of the 10-year capital plan every year for any adjustments. And you can take then to see a look at how the reserves will be affected over time.
Yeah, I think that's the problem that we always face with the budget, which is a 1-year look and then the
Yes.
10-year look.
All right. So I know were we going to go into camera for that discussion? Sorry. What we'll do is we'll go to Kathy and then we will have to go into camera to answer Andrew's question. So Kathy.
Yeah, this is sort of, it's definitely related to the budget, but I just wonder, given what we have in front of us and what we know we need to do and what we can't do, is there any advocacy work you would recommend or, we could think about as a board if we could to advocate for more dollars, different categories? Is there anything that you think we could do in that front, given our budget and maybe not just to the provincial government, but anywhere?
Sally?
So the board has previously, and I would highly recommend do it again, is to lobby the province regarding the WECI funding and our annual transfer. So we are mandated by our regulation to deliver services on behalf of the province. They actually cut that amount in half in 2019 after 17 years of a freeze. So we hadn't received any increase, cost of living increase in that amount since well, basically the turn of the century. And then in 2019, they cut it. And so number one, I would really like to see reinstatement of the other half and then indexing going forward on that annual levy that covers our costs to deliver services for the province. That would be number one. Number two is similarly, they hadn't increased the value of an envelope of money that is distributed amongst CAs on an annual basis for capital projects. And as we all know, inflation has been alive and well in recent years, but that amount hadn't changed also in roughly 20 years. So the province really needs to improve the amount that it's supporting jurisdictions in renewing of its capital infrastructure. They did adjust slightly the administration of that program to make it ever so slightly easier to implement. But the main constraint in the administration of that funds is you are told roughly anywhere from April through to June about how much money you're receiving that year, and you are expected to spend it by February of the following year. So you have less than 12 months to undertake a capital project that, of course, you couldn't tender until you even knew you had the money coming in. Those are two key areas that we need to continue to lobby the government of Ontario regarding. And that's, this is, as I say, over 20 years. So it's successive governments, regardless of their stripe, who have chosen not to improve the funding model to CAs.
Okay, I appreciate that. And it's something we can think about. This is a committee, but as a full board, if we can remember that, there's this, we can try, certainly send letters. I will say that, I don't know if you're following the audit committee yesterday at the City of Ottawa and the file that had to do with the RVCA. And, the auditor, as the City of Ottawa, just focused on what the city could do differently, right? But there were a number of questions for the RVCA that councillors had. That's not us, but it's something we could potentially learn from with their, the brief summary is it just they relied on a letter somewhat from the City of Ottawa. But yet their fundamental work is to do that floodplain mapping and or not do it if they don't see they need to do it. And it was a big deal. So I wouldn't ever want to see a situation where we said, well, based on our budgets, based on our capabilities, abilities, staffing levels, experts or non-experts, we were relying on others. And then there, a project came into question. I mean, we probably rely on others for some things, but I thought it'd be interesting to see if the Ontario Auditor General takes up that file and what the Ontario Auditor General would have to say about the capabilities of the RVCA, not us, but in terms of that impacting budget.
Do you want to explain in more detail, Kathy, what you're getting at? Because I know what you're getting at because I read the news report, but do you want to explain how it may have an impact on this budget?
Sure. Well, just in terms of, it's also on our advocacy role. So just the very quick synopsis is there was a very big subdivision project that was potentially in a floodplain in an area of Ottawa. And what happened was the RVCA asked the City of Ottawa, could you send us a letter regarding what you think about this development? City of Ottawa staff should not have sent this letter, but nonetheless sent a letter saying, City of Ottawa supports this because our official plan indicates we support this. And what we don't know is how much that letter impacted the RVCA's decision to say, okay, we approve it. So when we sat at planning committee, when that file came up, there was a lot of comment about, well, geez, the RVCA supported this, so therefore it must be okay. Well, now people are questioning, is it okay? And, it could be fine. But the one councillor asked, maybe we need to get the Ontario Auditor General involved in this to see if this was actually done properly. So hence I say, if the Ontario Auditor General were to get involved and know that our City of Ottawa Auditor General brought this whole project and file to the attention of the Ontario Auditor General, something may come out of it. And so I just think for us, Mississippi Valley, maybe we will follow that closely and see if there's not an advocacy role to say, because the question is, why does the RVCA rely on a letter from the City of Ottawa? The RVCA is in the business of making sure these things are done properly and safely in the right land and water is safe and all the rest of it. So why do they really care about the City of Ottawa? Unless maybe it's because they think We want your expertise because we maybe don't have enough expertise. And this is all, we don't know why they relied on this letter and how much they relied on the letter. But I just think it's something for us to follow because it may then bring about a report from the Ontario Auditor General on conservation authorities.
Great, thank you for that explanation. And I guess, well, I know you will be, general manager will be following what is going on there. So, do you want to say anything? All right.
The only thing I'll add is that interestingly enough, I'm not going to touch on that particular case, but we are going to be dealing with something comparable at the Policy and Planning Committee tomorrow. And that is, what do we do when the province approves something under those ministerial orders and the like? In that case, we have to implement. And so tomorrow's meeting, we're going to be tabling updated policies and objectives that will help staff guide the approach that we take when we're literally under orders to issue a permit on something that we wouldn't have recommended otherwise.
I just think this is an opportunity. It may highlight, you know, what the conservation authorities do, what their budgets are, why their budgets are what they are. Are they arm's length? You know, are they pressured, influenced? And it's an interesting time, actually. This is one file, of course, with the city of Ottawa. But as you know, the province is the premier is being investigated by the RCMP on land deals and where it would be appropriate to build or not build. Lands were taken out of the official plan in Ottawa. Anyway, it's an interesting time. I just think we should all sort of generally follow that in terms of how this might affect our budgets going forward.
Great, thank you. So I think getting back to the details of the budget here, we need a motion to go into camera, and I'm going to kind of sort of make it up as we go along. So I need resolved that the Finance and Admin Committee enter into camera to discuss a issue of potential financial impact to the Conservation Authority, and that financial and legal impact to the Conservation Authority, and that Sally McIntyre, Stacy Millard, and Scott Lowrick remain in the room. I think they can stay as well. All right. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Dana's new.
Okay, Dana and Kelly. Dana and Kelly can also remain in the room. So I need someone to move for this in-camera motion. I see Paul moves and Roy seconds. All in. Well, are there any? Yes. Are there any more comments or questions on the draft budget before we head to resolution to vote on it? Seeing none. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee, sorry, wrong one. Where'd that one go? All right. Know where it went. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee recommend that the draft 2024 budget be tabled with the Board of Directors for consideration and circulated to member municipalities for comment. I need someone to move. Roy Hudel. No, and Andrew Kendrick seconds. Final comments or questions? All in favor? All right, the motion is carried. Thank you. I don't know what happened to mine. Now, we had amended the agenda. So I think all I need to do is simply say that we will, no, I don't say anything. No, but I understand, but that the agenda was amended. So now I have to deal with an amended agenda that had it on it. Right? Because I need motion to defer. Is that? Okay, so I need a motion to defer the item 7 topic that we added to the agenda. Is everyone okay with that approach? All right, so I need someone to move. I think Paul moves, Roy Hudel seconds. All in favor? All right, so we have deferred that item. Thank you very much. Any other business before we close the meeting? And I stare daggers at anyone. Yeah, thanks for the baked goods. Okay. Next time I'm going to put something that put you all asleep in it. I think I have. Anyway, I resolved that, no, it was a good discussion. I'm just joking. Anyway, resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting be adjourned. I need someone to move. See, Roy moves, Mary Lou seconds, all in favor. We are now adjourned. You can have your conversation.